will see my name on the ballot. However, I am requesting everybody votes for Cole. And the reason why is because I got involved in the school fiasco that has happened over the past couple of years. I've watched as Alpine School District has repeatedly ignored parents and has repeatedly ignored requests and concerns about teachers and education and all of these things that are happening in school. And I wanted to be involved in that. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a big difference not only in my own home, but in the home of thousands of others, because children are our future. They are where the country is headed and where the direction is going. With that, I threw my hat in the ring. I was like, I'm gonna run for school board. And I was gung-ho. I was like, I'm doing this. Cole and I both went to convention, and Cole and I are very clearly the conservative vote. We're very clearly the person who is against any indoctrination of children, good or bad. Children should not be indoctrinated, they should be educated, very different. And so it was very clear that Cole and I had similar stances on everything. We both went to county convention where our opponents did not receive endorsement. I missed it by 1 vote. Actually, if you want to get really technical, I missed it by 0.4%. But Cole had received that endorsement. And both Cole and I saw at that moment, we're gonna split this vote. We're gonna make it so that people have 2 really excellent candidates, and it might risk having other candidates who are not as excellent getting that vote. And so I made the decision that I would support Cole. He is an excellent candidate. I wanted to squash any rumors now and here. I'm still a candidate on the ballot. I am, but I did not vote for myself. I put my vote for Cole Kelley, and I submitted that vote last week. So it's already done. I have already voted, and I am encouraging everybody to do that. I also feel it's really, really important to understand. Oh, hey, well, thank you. Oh, that's loud. I also feel it's really, really important to understand that I did not drop out of the race. I am still fighting tooth and nail, but I am not fighting for myself. I'm fighting for somebody else because it's more important. It is more important that somebody wins election who actually is going to listen to the voice of the people, to be a parents first candidate, to be a common sense candidate, to be a person who can actually stand for those values that Utah was founded upon, which is family first. And so with that, yes, I'm on the ballot, yes, I am a candidate. I already voted for Cole Kelley, and I encourage everyone to do the same.
The microphone is for the recording.
Okay.
Not so we can hear.
I was gonna say I got a school teacher voice, you know. So
it's for the recording.
I can be loud, but I'll use the microphone.
So just be obedient.
I will.
Okay.
I will. Sometimes I can tend to be a little bit of a rebel, but today I'll be obedient, right? I appreciate that, Jody. Thank you, and it's an honor to have your endorsement, and so I appreciate that. So one thing that I want to do is those that are here in attendance, I want to hear your voice, and I want to hear what your concerns are. I want to address your questions. I know that we've had some submitted online, and we do have an audience online, but if you made the effort to be here and you have questions, I definitely want to make sure that we get to your questions and address those. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, just an introduction. My wife Stephanie is here in front. She's recording for me. She's doing my recording, and Stephanie and I have been married about 3 years. Stephanie has 4, I have 5, so together we have 9. So we're the Brady Bunch in a lot of senses, and we now have 2 little granddaughters, and so that's an exciting and fun stage of life. But my 5 kids, I'm a proud dad of 5, and my oldest is married with a granddaughter. My granddaughter, her daughter, right? And she's, I've got a former student right here, and he came up, and he better ask me questions tonight, because I want to hear from him. But I like to, I teach financial literacy, and I think it's a subject that kids need, and I'm somebody who is practical and reasonable, and try to make sure that kids leave my they're going to use. And that's something I pride myself on. But I've also tried to, throughout the years, try to instill that in my kids. And my oldest daughter is a buyer for Nordstrom and doing very well, 25 years old, and just having a ton of success. My second daughter, Abby, she's a college student at BYU. She's a dancer for BYU, and she's a Cougarette, and was recently named the president of the Cougarettes. So that's pretty cool, pretty awesome honor for Abby to be the president of what I think is the program at BYU that will let you down the least. Okay? If you cheer for other sports programs at BYU, they'll let you down a lot, but not the Cougarettes. So if you want a team to cheer for, they'll keep you happy, that's the team, okay? My oldest son, Zeke, he graduated from Pleasant Grove High School. He is on a mission in Paraguay. He just moved past the 1 year mark, and he thinks he's on a 2-year camp out. He thinks mud is great. He's embracing the third world lifestyle, but just is doing awesome, just loves it. I've got a daughter, Sadie, and Sadie is going to be a senior in high school. She's a cheerleader. And then I have a son, T, and T is a sophomore, going to be a sophomore this year. So T will be the only child of mine that went to the high school where I teach. I'm kind of sad about it, but I'm like, you're coming to the school where I teach. So he's at American Fork High School with me, and I've taught at American Fork High School for 15 years.
1 more minute.
But education is a passion of mine. Jody kind of mentioned, I've been politically involved for a long time. I've been politically outspoken for a long time. I try to study the issues. I try to make sure I know and understand what I'm talking about before I run my mouth, and I run my mouth plenty. But I try to make sure that I'm informed when I do that, and I try to make sure I'm an informed voter and vet candidates seriously. And I've been really thrilled with the process of watching candidates or voters vet me through this process, and I've been happy to try to provide every opportunity that I can to get out and to make sure that I make myself available to the voters so they know where I stand on the issues. And so I'm excited to be here to get to know you, to answer some of your questions, and if you don't feel like I adequately answered your question, let me know. Had a meet and greet last night, and somebody asked me a question, and I answered it, and like later that night, I'm like, I've got to get that guy. I got to find out who that is, because I don't know if I adequately answered his question the way that I wanted to. Made contact with him today, made sure that he knew where I stood, and I want to make sure that we do that tonight, that you know where I'm at, and if you have follow-up questions, feel free to stick around. I'm happy to talk with you. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll have to share this. So I'll read it, and then I'll
grab another one.
Is there another one?
Yeah, there's one here.
Great.
You've got the
Does your wireless
one,
not
it's
work?
on my-
No, I didn't try it.
Okay, first question from online from Jane.
Carrie, will you just announce why Ada and Carson weren't able to make it again for the?
Oh, for the microphone? So Karsten tried to rearrange his schedule and evidently was not able to do that. So he let us know this morning that he wouldn't be able to make it. And also Ada, she also couldn't make it. She said she's already done a few of these types of events and wanted to focus her time in other areas. So that was their responses. Okay, so one of the questions online from Jane is about so how do you plan to ensure that school board policies are reviewed, updated with a procedure in place and followed?
Okay, I'm gonna test. I want to make sure this we're good. So, good question. Thank you. What was the person's name?
Jane.
Jane.
Jane. Thank you, Jane, for your question.
Doe.
Step one, you have to read the policies first. And you have to review the policies, you have to go through them. I'm not going to pretend like I was a studier of policy prior to being a candidate for the Alpine Board of Education, but since filing the run, I've read a ton of looking through Alpine School District policy. And I've come across several that I'm like, how does this work? How does this policy work in our district? And it's all, you know, you have policies and procedures to be able to follow policies and procedures. And part of the struggle that we're having in Alpine School District is I feel like we're so bogged down with policy that we're not even following our own policy in a lot of instances. There was, as I was reading, there was one policy I came across that talked about parent complaints, okay? Parent complaints, and it was one paragraph long, and usually, you know, sometimes it'll have the policy and then it will have some procedures of what you do about that policy. This policy was titled Parent Complaints, about a paragraph long. It explained that parent complaints were to be handled at the school level, which, hey, I can respect that, okay? But if it's not getting resolved at the school level, then what, right? Then what? And I looked at this policy and I looked at the last time it had been reviewed and looked at when it had been written. It was written in the 90s and it hasn't been reviewed since 2003. Okay? So the first, you have to read your policies first, and then you're going through the process of reviewing those policies. I think what you've got to do is you've got to choose to divvy up, you know, amongst different board members to look at them on a regular basis. One of the things that you will see as you read policy in Alpine School District is you will be able to see when that policy was implemented and the last time that policy has been reviewed. And many of our policies in Alpine School District haven't been reviewed for over a decade. And it's when we talk about school safety, what are the policies? Have we looked at what's in place and the procedures of what's in place with school safety? And I think that's one of the most important responsibilities of a board member is to write policy. And you've got to read them, you've got to review them, and go through a process of making sure that those policies are up to date and applicable to what we're dealing with in our time.
Okay, the second question. I am a neurodivergent queer parent of a neurodivergent with queer children. What specifically are your plans to keep my children safe in their schools?
The struggle that we're having in our schools is that we're catering to lifestyles. And I have students from very diverse backgrounds, and I care about each one of those students. And I want to make sure that each one of those students, their physical and their emotional needs are being taken care of and met in some way. But what we can't turn our schools into is places where sex is becoming the issue, and sexual orientation is at the forefront of what we're doing, and how I identify is becoming more important than what you're being taught. And I want to be sympathetic to the parent that asked this question, and I certainly want to make sure that this child exists in a school environment where they feel like they can receive the same type of education of any other student that's attending that school. But what's happening in our current culture, and it's happening with sexual orientation, and it's happening with race, is we're dividing people by race, and we're dividing people by sexual orientation, instead of uniting people and working together. And if elected to the board, I want to, policies like CRT, critical race theory, that is a divisive idea and philosophy that divides people by race, I think is a dangerous philosophy. And I want to rid that in our schools, and rid that in our curriculum, and teach kids that, it doesn't matter what your background. The American dream is for every kid, no matter how you choose to identify, and no matter how you were born, what your skin color is, and other things that may be attributes that you have. And so we've got to remove the emphasis on sex, we've got to remove the emphasis on race, and we have to unite and move forward together as human beings.
Thank you. Other question, do you support the anticipated $500 million bond?
No.
Why? Well, explain what it is.
Sure.
And why you don't like it.
Well, here's, Alpine School District has basically done a survey, some polling to kind of look at a new bond and what that bond, whether that bond would pass or not, and it would be for building more schools, updating more facilities, and other things like that. I am for looking at schools, and I am for looking at updating. But one of the things that we, and I'm gonna segue that really into what the real issue is, which is the Orem feasibility study. And right now, as the representative of the Mountain View cluster in seat number 7, what I think is going to be important is first looking at the feasibility of Alpine School District saying, hey, we're a monster. Alpine School District has almost 90,000 students, okay? The bureaucracy of Alpine School District is just leveled. And part of the thing that people continue to ignore is the reason why Orem City is wanting to create their own school district. It's not about money. It's about people being heard. It's about voices and parents feeling like they're being ignored. And because of the bureaucracy, I was at a wrestling camp this morning, and I talked with a coach from Beaver, okay? Wrestling coach from Beaver, Utah. I said, does your superintendent know your name? She's like, yeah, of course he does, right? I said, how many of your athletes does your superintendent know? He's like, he knows almost all of our kids on our team, right? How many kids in Alpine School District do you think our superintendent knows of those 90,000 kids? And I don't expect him to know the names of 90,000 kids, but when you start looking at the levels of bureaucracy in Alpine School District, there's so many levels of bureaucracy that the names are getting lost, and what is important and what's needed for that individual student is getting lost through levels of bureaucracy in Alpine School District. And so I think Alpine School District needs to look at saying, rather than just continue to spend lumps of money and continue to do this, let's look at really creating a scenario where there's more local control of our schools and the needs of our students are being met at the local level. And that's what I think the Orem feasibility study does.
So it sounds like you support the Alpine School District becoming, breaking out Orem. Is it lead?
I think that Alpine School District is too big, and I do think that it's time to look at breaking up the district, yeah.
So what's the process to actually break that up, or, create another school district?
So what Orem City has currently done is they have voted, the Orem City Council unanimously voted 7-0 to do a feasibility study. Okay, and basically what that feasibility study is doing is looking at the finances of creating their own school district. What does it look like if Orem were to separate off and create their own school district, right? Orem has approved that study, and when that study comes back, we're going to learn more about, okay, does it make financial sense? Does it make fiscal sense for Orem to create their own school district? And if fiscally it comes back, and in my opinion, if it looks horrible financially, then you don't do it. If it's 50-50, I think you do it. Because the bigger question, once again, is more about local control of our schools. And if Orem citizens want to have more say in what's happening in Orem schools, then creating their own school district allows them more of a voice. Right now, Orem has 2 seats on the Alpine Board of Education. In an Orem-only district, if Vineyard came along, perhaps if Linden came along, then you may end up with 4 or 5 Orem seats, maybe one from Vineyard, maybe one, who knows what that's going to look like, but you have more local voices that are having a say in what's happening in your schools. And so it provides more local control. And the analogy that I continue to use with people is, look, it might make more financial sense to take our 50 states and combine a bunch of services at the federal level. But what that does is it creates a whole bunch of bureaucracy and you lose state rights. Okay? It may be a little more inefficient to have 50 states, but it creates more local control. And I think that we're at a point where there needs to be more local control in our schools, and the bureaucracy in Alpine School District has created a situation where that's not happening.
Okay, now that we asked a few from online, is anyone in the audience, would they like to ask a question? And if not, I have more online, but does anyone want to ask a question?
I'll ask a question.
Sure.
I'd like to hear your opinion on schools of choice and charter schools.
I am a big advocate that you should choose what's best for your student. And if you think homeschooling your student is the best for your student, then you should homeschool your student. And if you think that a charter school provides a better option for your student, you should choose to have your student educated at a charter school. As a school board member, my charge, and one of the things that I'm responsible for, is making sure that the schools in Alpine School District are excellent schools. But I think competition, and I'm a big fan of competition. Alpine School District, I don't remember how long ago this happened, but when Investigations Math, we all remember it on some level, right? When Investigations Math came in, and Alpine School District said, you will learn math this way, okay? And parents were throwing a fit. This is not how my child learns. This is not how my child is going to learn math. We're the experts, you be quiet, that's how your child's going to learn math. Well, what happened? Well, what happened is a whole bunch of charter schools started popping up in Alpine School District, and people found alternative methods to educate their students and have different ways of educating them and teaching them math. And what did it force Alpine School District to do? Step back and say, whoa, wait a second. Okay, we'll provide some alternatives, right? Because the competition forces that. If you have a monopoly, I get to tell you what your decision is. But if competition exists, then we have to compete for students. And so as a school board member, I want to make sure that we have excellent schools and that we're competing with those charter schools and that we're competing with the options of homeschooling students, so that when students attend our schools, they have an excellent opportunity But I think those things are great because they keep us in check, and I think they keep us examining the job that we're doing. So, yeah.
Other questions from the audience? Okay, well, that's another one online. This is on the topic of school security. There's a couple of questions here at once, so let me, I'll ramble through them and you can decide what you want to talk about. So things like, should school teachers be allowed to conceal carry guns while in school? Do you generally feel our schools are already safe? Do you feel cameras monitoring classroom activity is a good or bad idea? Stuff like that.
Got it. Let's start with school teachers being armed. I don't think that any and every school teacher should be armed, but I think that a school teacher who feels comfortable, and it should be their choice first, not somebody telling them they should or they ought to, but if a school teacher feels competent and has gone through proper training, and I would say not just a concealed carry permit, but I'm going through some training with the Utah County Sheriff's Office right now, and I'm going through a 7-week course, and I'm not here to say right now that at the end of that 7-week course I'm ready to carry in a school, okay? But I am not opposed to a teacher carrying in schools, certainly concealed, okay? But I think that provides another level of protection. We live in Utah County where we got kids going out and knocking doors all over the country selling security systems, right? We got Vivint in our backyard, okay? And when you knock on somebody's door, you can look on your phone and see who's there, right? And you can decide whether you want to answer that door or you can decide whether you don't answer that door, you know? And just to have that system in place, to have a camera that says who's knocking at our door at this elementary school, or who's trying to come into this high school. And I'm absolutely amazed. I'm a high school teacher. I teach at American Fork High School. I have a keychain with 5 middle keys on it. Still, when we have the technology to be able to give me a card and say, you have access to these doors here. And if I'm allowed to be in that door, I swipe that card, that door lets me in, I can walk in, right? And the door's locked behind you because, you know, but during a school day, you know, to monitor every single door, and yeah, schools are keeping them locked and things like that, but to have electronic systems, the technology exists for us to be more sophisticated in knowing who's coming in and out of our schools. And I think we need to invest in making sure that we know who's coming in and out of our school and that there are access points where visitors can come in, okay, but they're identified before they come in, and make sure that all other doors are secure in school. But there's very reasonable, safe ways to do it, and we've got to implement technology. We've got to make sure that we invest in some technology that allows the right people to get in the right doors at the right times. So, yeah.
Cameras monitoring the classrooms, is that good or bad?
There's, you know, I'm all for teacher accountability. If this is about teacher, if it's about safety, I don't know that a camera in the classroom is going to help with safety. If it's about accountability, I'm all for teacher accountability, but there's all kinds of privacy issues with students when you start saying we're going to put a camera in every single classroom. If you have students with learning disabilities, if you have students that are struggling to read, if you have students that, you know, when a teacher does a read aloud, I don't know that we want to advertise to the world every student's learning disabilities. Those are things that are private. So I think we have to be sensitive to that. We've got to find a balance between, you know, figuring out how we can hold teachers accountable, and I'm all for accountability for teachers, and I'm a teacher myself. I wouldn't mind you putting a camera in my classroom to film what I'm doing, but I wouldn't want the students in my classroom would be filmed. And so how you would go about doing that, I think can be problematic, but I think we can find some solutions that hold teachers accountable, but don't invade on the privacy of our students.
We have the hand raised, it was revoked?
I'll talk to that one.
Revoked, okay.
You followed it.
Okay. Question?
What do you think of a transfer portal for student athletes, like a college where they're able to change schools based upon experience or lack of opportunity?
I wish this was a school board issue. It's more of a Utah High School Activities Association issue. But I'll share with you my thoughts and my philosophy on it. The transfer rules in the state of Utah are an absolute joke right now. If as a freshman you can declare to go wherever you want to go, and I support that. You know, if I want to take my son to a certain school for a certain reason, whether it's athletics or whether it's band, there's a lot of students that like to come to American Fork High School because we have one of the best bands in the country, right? And we don't say, no, sorry, I can't do that. If you want to come and you want to be a part of our band, for the most part, kids can make that happen. And I, you know, when students want to attend a program, I don't see a problem with that. But one of two things needs to happen, okay? When you start your eligibility at a school, transferring to another school, we either need to say, if you transfer, we don't care what the reason is, you're going to sit out for a year, okay? Or open it all up. But what's happening, and I'm gonna tell a story, I'm not going to share names, but there were two kids who, I'm a wrestling coach, and these two kids were wrestlers at Sky Ridge High School. One was a 195 pounder, the other one was a 185 pounder, and they were state champion wrestlers. And they transferred to another school because they were getting bullied. State champion wrestlers getting bullied. Right? And it's turned into a joke. Kids go wherever they want to go, and the honest are the ones that are being punished in a lot of ways. So, but a college transfer portal, nah, I think it's a bad idea. Once you establish eligibility at a school, compete for that school, that's the decision you made. If you want to transfer, sit out a year.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? Before I go another one? Okay. Do you feel asking kids about their own life, personal beliefs, emotional or mental status, and background is appropriate or not appropriate for a school to ask in a survey?
No, and that's an easy answer. But here's the struggle, and this is what I think parents need to understand about the teaching profession, is that we have students that come to us that are broken, and I'll just use that word for lack of a better term, and it's hard to educate a broken student, and so in a lot of ways we have to try to figure out how to help this student before they're going to ever be able to get an education in our schools. And I think that there are processes that we can go through to find who those students are, but I certainly don't think that a survey is the way that you're going to do that. And you know, providing different services to help students out. This is where you start to get into, you know, as I answered the question before about you know, a queer student, for example. You know, what are schools' roles? What are we asking schools to? What service are we asking them to provide? Are we asking them to be mental health counselors? Are we asking them to be, you know, social workers? Are we asking them to, you know, and that's where we have to start doing a better job of defining the role of what we want our schools to do. Right now, I think that schools primary focus, primary objective should be to educate students. And so when we get students who are broken and we're having a hard time educating, I think we need to look for outside sources that can help that student and provide them with help so that they can function in the school system. So.
We have an audience question. Please speak.
Cole, you mentioned about teacher accountability. Is there a process, or do you have a idea about how teachers would be made accountable for what they teach?
Yeah. This is the question I got asked last night where I'm like, I answered one, I'm going to tell you both answers. That I gave one answer last night and then I thought about another answer and I called and I'm going to give them both to you tonight, okay? Because one of the struggles that teachers are having right now is they're having struggles holding their students accountable, right? And so it's hard to hold a teacher accountable when a teacher can't hold their students accountable. You know, Alpine School District this year said everybody walks. Doesn't matter whether you earned a diploma or not, everybody walks. I have searched all over for who made that decision. I don't know if it was a board decision. I don't know if it was an administrator in the district office that made that decision. Somebody made the decision that all students in Alpine School District get to walk. Okay? Now, do you know what kind of an impact that had on teachers in terms of trying to motivate students to learn? You know, there's a teacher across the hall from me who said, I was working with this student, I was helping him do some things to pass my class, to earn some credit that he had failed earlier in the school year, and I was working with him to remediate. And once the student found out that he gets to walk, and he doesn't need a diploma to walk, he said, hey, guess what? I get to walk. I don't even need the credit in your class anymore. See ya. She never saw him again. Right? And a lot of those decisions, attendance policies, right? And I know we can blame a lot of these things on COVID, right? But we can't hold them accountable for attending our class, you know? And so one of the first things we have to fix is we have to fix holding students accountable. There has to be some accountability to students. And there's so much emphasis on graduating kids in Alpine School District, and that's a statewide thing. So much emphasis on graduation, we're forgetting to educate kids, you know? And so we're pushing them through the system, you know? I had another teacher who, the administrator comes and said, I want you to work with this kid. He failed your class first term. I know it's fourth term, and I know graduation's in a couple of weeks, but what can you do to help him pass your class from first term? And the teacher said, he didn't do a thing. He didn't show up to class. He didn't do a thing to earn credit in my class. The student doesn't deserve to pass my class. The administrator said, no. I'm asking you, what are you going to do to work with this student? Teacher said he didn't earn a grade, he failed my class. Administrator insisted. So the teacher said, here's my username and password, okay? I'm not changing the student's grade, he didn't earn a grade in my class. If you want to go in and change his grade in my Skyward system, do what you think you need to do. But he didn't deserve a grade in my class. 2 weeks later, the teacher saw that student walking. Right? So how can teachers be held accountable if we can't hold our students accountable? Right? And so that's step number one, is that teachers need to be supported in holding students accountable for getting their work done and earning an education. Second part of that is the teacher, right? I'm a school teacher who's worked in Alpine School District for 25 years, and I've fought against my teachers union for 25 years. Our teachers union has an absolute chokehold on the voice for teachers in education. Okay? And they promote mediocrity. that organization promotes mediocre teachers. You know, and I think they have a place, but to have the monopoly, and it's in policy, it's in Alpine School District policy, that whatever association has the most members exclusively gets to negotiate with Alpine School District. And that needs to change. There needs to be more voices at the table, more teachers' voices at the table, and more voices that are willing to say, you know what, I'm open to being held accountable. Okay? And I'm open to, but I'm also somebody who is for merit pay for teachers and finding ways to promote excellent teachers and to reward excellent teachers. You know? We have a pay scale that is simply about years and education. That's it. Okay? Years, education. I have 2 master's degrees. You think I'm a really smart guy. Okay? But I don't know how much those master's degrees help me be a better educator. I could probably give you 10 things that I could have done that would have made me a better educator. In fact, I can tell you a couple that I did do. And I did some internships with some businesses, and I'm a financial literacy teacher. And I did some internships with businesses that I thought were very helpful, very educational, that helped me understand what is happening in the workplace that could help my students, you know, and be applicable. I did work with Auditor Dougal, John Dougal, and I put together a report with the state auditor where we looked at financial literacy at the 10-year anniversary and how is this class doing and how's it having an impact on students, right? And we learned a lot about that, and you know, that's something that I think helped make me a better teacher by looking at that data and looking at what is making a difference for kids in financial literacy. And neither of those 2 things helped my pay in Alpine School District. Just about years and education, you know. And people are buying degrees online nowadays. I'm sorry, but it's true. You know. So, yeah.
Was the question
That was
answered adequately?
The question was answered adequately.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, different follow-up from a previous question about, you mentioned you weren't a fan of the $500 million bond, but when is it appropriate for to raise a bond and or taxes?
I do think you get what you pay for. I think probably the biggest reason I'm not for the bond, it's more the timing of when this bond is coming. That's more what I'm looking at right now. For Alpine School District to be presenting a bond in the middle of Orem's City Council conducting a feasibility study and potentially looking at putting on the ballot Orem separating off and creating their own district, I think it's political. And that's really where I probably have the biggest problem. Do I think that bonds are appropriate? Do I think that Alpine School District has been fairly responsible with their bonding and property taxes? Yeah, I do. I think Alpine School District has been fairly responsible there. And I think that, but this is where you're looking at, right? Is you look at, and that's where balancing bonds over the last decade, the numbers are clear now, and like our very first debate, there were some numbers thrown out, and I went and researched those numbers now, and I'm like, wow, those numbers were drastically wrong. But there is no doubt that the city of Orem, what they're paying in property taxes and what they're getting in bond money is, Orem's losing. You know, there is a lot more money going out west, okay, than is coming to Orem. And so you're looking at a bond right now in the middle of that, and I think it's political. So do I think there are times to bond, you know, to issue bonds? Yeah. Are there times to look at, and I know that one thing that Alpine School District's done a pretty good job of doing is when one bond so I recognize that they've been, but I do think the timing of this bond is very political.
Okay, so if Orem, Vineyard, Linden were to split out into separate district, you do feel like it is appropriate to have a bond at some point?
I think you have to look at the needs of the area and look at the needs of the school. You look at Mountain View High School right now, and you look at the building and what it can do, and you know, I think you have to look at those things. I know that, hey, one thing that the incumbent did that, hey, I'll give her some credit for is Trailside Elementary here in Vineyard. Yeah, it was needed, it was necessary. Okay. So you have to look at the needs of what the area is in need of, and if you've got dilapidated schools that are breaking down, one thing that Jody has done a great job of enlightening me on is that, you know, why do we have to tear a school down and rebuild a brand new school rather than renovating the existing school? The cost of doing so is going to be much more feasible, and you can get just as good a product, you know, by doing something like that. So that would be something I'd be open to looking at, but yeah, you have to look at the needs of the area. There's no doubt that the growth is taking place out west, and that they need new schools. I understand. Yeah.
Other questions from the audience? Okay. What do you feel are the three most important roles as a member of the school board?
I mentioned policy, and creating policy is an important role of a board member. Reviewing those policies and making sure that the policies that are in place reflect the values of the community. And so that, I think that's an important role there. I think another important role is being a voice for the people. And I think that's something that's been missing. If you've listened to previous debates, you've learned about the Office of Civil Rights Investigation that's happening at Mountain View High School. And I've talked to both sides of this issue. And I've talked to an administrator that was kind of the scapegoat in that situation, and I've talked to parents that were involved in that situation. And I am convinced that had a board member stepped into that situation and been a mediator, it could have been resolved at a school level, and we could have avoided an Office of Civil Rights investigation. Okay? When the board member was approached, the response was, I have to recuse myself, I can't get involved in this. That's wrong. You could have got involved in that. You could have helped to resolve the scenario, and you could have recused yourself at the level that there may have been a case and then you had to rule on that case. That's when you could have recused yourself. But board members need to be that voice for the people. And if you think your job is to answer to the superintendent and not to the people, I think you're confusing your role as a board member. So I think that's the second thing. And then I think the third thing is working with the community to create the best schools that we can. Working with the teachers in the schools, the administrators in the schools, and trying to find a solution to provide the best schools that we can. And so I think those are the three things that a school board member should be doing.
Thank you. How will you support parental rights in the classroom?
I support parental rights in the classroom. I think as educators, we've got to be an open book. We've got to be transparent. This is something where I think parents, together with educators, together with administrators, if we all came to the same table, we could figure this out. I really believe that. Okay. think we could figure out how to solve the problem of transparency. Asking me, and I know there was a bill at the state legislature, okay, but asking me as a school teacher to take my lesson plans and put them online so that you can go look at them. I'm sorry, but that's not going to solve the problem that people are wanting solved, because the discussion that I have with my students in first period is not the same discussion that I have with my students in fourth period at the high school level, you know? And so, like, how can I document what's going to happen in this class because of the line of questioning of the students that I have in that class versus what's going to happen in this class, in the line of questioning that's going to happen in that class. And so, you know, I could put a lesson plan online. I could show you what I'm going to be teaching that day, but it's not going to solve a teacher at Lehigh High School going off on how dumb parents are. You know, I don't think she's going to put that in her curriculum. I don't think that's something that she's going to post online, right? But I do think that parents they have a right to know what's being taught in the classroom, and I think that we need to come together as administrators, teachers, and parents, and we need to figure out how to be transparent. And instead of, you know, I do think if we could do a better job of solving this problem in Alpine School District or at a local level, rather than asking a state legislator to do it. You know, they throw together bills and sometimes, again, don't have the perspective of what's happening in a classroom. So we've got to figure out how to resolve the issue, because parents have a right to know, and teachers need to accept the responsibility of being transparent about what's being taught in our classroom.
We're getting close to the end, but of our time, that is.
Are there any follow-ups to these questions? You guys,
I've got one.
Let's hear it.
Do you want to push for Utah to get out of the National School Board Association?
Yes. I feel about the National School Board Association about the same as I feel about the teachers' unions, which I think that their values and the values that they reflect don't reflect the values of our community. The values of the NEA are so far from what we subscribe to in our area. The UEA is, I still think, very far from what we subscribe to in our area. And so the National School Board Association, same thing. This is an organization whose values don't reflect the values of our community. And so absolutely.
Other follow-up questions?
And there have been 25 states that have already done that. And why hasn't Utah? Right? It blows my mind that we haven't.
What are the negative things that would come up? Why do some states think that's a bad idea? To break away from that.
So 25 have, 25 haven't. Why haven't the other 25? You know, yeah, right? I mean, the National School Board Association is training school boards. That's one of the things that the incumbent in my race brags as to why she should be reelected, is because Alpine School District has invested so much in her getting training from the National School Board Association that we need to elect her for another 4 years so that she can take the policies that have been implemented and that she's been taught by the National School Board Association and implement them into our schools, right? And I'm sorry, but that's not what we want implemented into our schools, is the philosophies and ideas of the National School Board Association, who's pushing ideas like CRT, critical race theory, and some of the policies that just don't fit with our community. So
I have another question.
yes,
Well, you've talked a lot about secondary education.
yes, yeah.
Not much about elementary school education, and
Yeah.
I know you've had young kids and have gone through elementary ed, but there are different issues in elementary school as there are in secondary. How do you propose that you're going to get to know about the issues in the elementary school?
That's a good question. And communication, reaching out, talking to the principals of those schools, talking to the teachers of those schools, making sure that I understand the issues of the students of those schools, for sure. I have a brother-in-law that's a principal at an elementary school. We talk often about the difference between, secondary schools, and I know even junior highs are different than high schools, and I get that. But an outstanding question, and yeah, certainly there are huge differences. When we're talking about classroom size, I've got ideas about at the high school level how, and I absolutely come from a high school mentality because that's where I've spent my career is at the high school level. Having that perspective I think is unique, but I'm very aware of the fact that that elementary school teachers, they work much harder than high school teachers. Yeah, absolutely. And you don't get your prep periods like we get, there's so much that's a challenge for elementary schools, and so yeah, I'm aware of that, and I need to be a listener, and I need to make sure that I'm hearing from elementary school teachers about the differences, when I'm looking at policy and procedure, and looking at, some things we can do to implement, ideas that will promote excellent teaching in the classroom. So, absolutely, thank you.
Well, I'm committed to end on time, so I just wanted a few thank yous. Thank you for Vineyard Elementary for letting us host this, the principal, custodian, teachers that helped, let us be here and talk about these important topics. And anyone can stay after and ask follow-up questions to Cole. But that is the end of our session.
Thank you. I heard myself talk.